What's good? What's good? What's good in the hood? Welcome back to another episode of the Good in the Hood podcast. I am, as always, your host, Juice. Joined this week with a special guest, man, three-time returning guest, the bro, man, Chicago's own and Chicagoland's own Defcee, man. How you feeling, bro?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Not only are you a third time returning guest, but you are basically a fourth time because this is the second time recording this episode due to technical issues. I appreciate your patience and understanding with it, man. Appreciate you, brother.
No doubt.
And of course, when I get you on, I like to go full hip hop nerd with you, man. It's always fun, always a fun conversation going full hip hop nerd with you. So I figured for episode 99, might as well, I'm saying, do it in the 90s in the proper way and just talk about some hip hop shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
And a big topic on my mind a lot lately is just because, like, going off of last year, the pandemic, and seeing like some of the nominations in the Grammys, seeing a bunch of the critically acclaimed albums all be from like quote unquote lyricists. And of course, like we had a conversation already in the past, but just to kind of go through it again with you, man, as far as about lyricism and hip hop and the importance of it. And you have some very interesting perspectives as an artist yourself. So I definitely want to hear you kind of dive deep into that. I want to share with the audience this time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I'll say that I think a lot of times we as fans of the culture and fans of the music tend to, in less than we used to, put this label of lyrical or lyricism on certain kinds of music. Mm. And a lot of times that music is coming from the East Coast, or if it's from the Midwest, usually it's some independent hip hop that people are giving that label to. If it's from out West, it's probably
Lupe. I mean, you about like west side of the city or west side?
The West Coast.
Oh, West Coast. Okay. Kendrick.
Yeah,
Kendrick.
if we're right. And I think that lyricism and being lyrical is not necessarily a one-note thing, right? So like somebody like an E40, for example, right? Not a lot of people identify him as a lyrical rapper. Right. But if you've ever listened to his verse on Dope Dealer by Schoolboy Q, where he's basically hitting two different rhyme schemes at one time, which is incredible. Like you have the bar and then a word at the end, and he's able to fit like 4 different rhyme schemes into 2 bars. That's crazy. That almost never happens. So
that's some biggie shit.
Yeah, but but people don't necessarily give him that same respect that they would give a Big, right?
Fair.
Or wouldn't give him the same respect that they would give Domino from Souls of Mischief or Tajay from Souls of Mischief, right? Who's also from the Bay Area. Right. So I think a lot of times we kind of really shortchange those artists who are regional artists because of the sound of their voice or their accent or whatever. Oh yeah, like I was saying, I think a lot of times, we shortchange certain artists because they sound quote unquote too regional.
That's fair.
So like Twista, for example, right, is from Chicago and really is one of the best rappers ever. If we just talk kind of like pure skill, right? The ability to have complex rhyme schemes and all that. But, he got dismissed as kind of like this local legend who is just a one-trick pony when that wasn't the case. Absolutely. And I feel like we saw the same thing happen with Bone Thugs too.
That's a great point.
Like I think that our definition of lyricism as artists grows and evolves with time because we're able to see from this side of the looking glass the difficulty in terms of how to execute certain things, versus a fan who might hear something and not appreciate it because they've already kind of in their head. And as a fan myself, like, I'm certainly guilty of this. You know, because we've basically pigeonholed lyricism as it can only sound like this, that, and the third. You know what I mean?
100%. And I mean, that's a great kind of way to launch the next question for you as far as the fans go. Like, do you feel like, especially with hip hop journalism in the past, like going from the source with the 5 mics, going to the blog era and everything in between, from the funk flexes and whatever else is going on with the media, do you feel like those people kind of control the narrative and kind of taught the fans what to like, in a sense?
So I grew up reading the source, like kind of the tail end of when it was quality, well into the this is Benzino's personal newsletter days of the source. With no disrespect. At a certain point, that's kind of what it was. But I will say that when you're when I was first starting out, and I was just kind of initially getting into hip hop as a fan and studying it as a craft, having the source include like the 500 greatest MCs in their, I think it was like their 500th issue or something like that. Was incredibly important, because now it's like, okay, cool. These are people I need to go study, right? These are albums I need to go study. And I think that was kind of the helpful side of things back when music journalism and hip hop journalism was a little bit more poppin'. I know that I learned a lot of what I know about all kinds of hip hop from rapreviews.com, which is run by the same guy who ran Original Hip Hop Lyrics Archive.
Did not know that.
Yeah, Steve flashed you on.
OHHLA was like I lived on that site. I lived on that site as a kid.
Yeah, me too, man. And I think that they had on Rap Reviews this section called the Nines, because they used to rate, they had a rating system, and I think they still do, where it was like, they would rate the music out of 10, they would rate the lyrics out of 10, and then, they would they only had a 0.5 decimal system or something like that, and then they'd cut it in half, and that would be the total. So anything that had a total rating of a 9 out of 10 or higher was in its own kind of special section. So I wound up listening to a lot of music that way. But the problem was that I think at a certain point, you have to evolve past trying to view music objectively, because there's nothing objective about it. We're not talking about music
basketball.
The way that we, right.
Yeah, that's a big mistake we all do.
Yeah, or even even anything that you can find data to back up, right? Any opinion that you can find data to back up. You can't really do that with music
at all, because there's no across all landscapes criteria to what makes what good, what makes what bad. There's no criteria unless you have your own personal, which is the definition of subjective. Literally. So that's my question for you, I guess, because even over quarantine, I remember I was a super fan of watching you, the Bros, the Pivot Gang. I think it was Film Diet, Benjamin Earl Turner. A bunch of you guys are doing these lyrical exercises online for the fans to see, making songs in like a matter of minutes, crazy verses in a matter of minutes. And with that, my question for you, I guess, is you mentioned lyricists and talk about how some lyrics, like E40, for example, with E40 doing that rhyme scheme and the dope ability to put multiple rhymes in each bar. What does that rank amongst the substance that's in the bar? What's more important to you, the scheme or the actual substance of the content?
I think it's got to be a little bit of everything.
Right.
So I came up on a lot of underground hip hop that hasn't aged well, because you go back and either either like I've grown up and I've grown out of the content of a lot of it, or what impressed me about it when I was a kid, now that I can kind of do some of those same things myself, in some cases kind of better than the people who I was coming up listening to, which again is not me being disrespectful, but more so kind of like that's how music evolves over generations.
100%.
I think that stuff impresses me a lot less, but I really love to revisit a lot of the stuff that I was ignoring, because as a fan, right, I was like so into my underground indie hip hop bag, or, you know, my grimy 90s, 2000s, New York, Boston, whatever hip hop bag, that I wasn't really tuned into a lot of stuff that has aged a lot better.
100%.
So, you know, and I think a lot of that has to do with not only the content, but also the way that the content is presented to you. So if I like comparing music to film a lot, right?
Okay.
So
also very subjective. Yeah.
So I think if you look at a movie like The Irishman, right? Scorsese, in terms of the content, is trying something really admirable, which is like all of the mafia stuff he was not able to cover in all of his other mafia movies, he's covering here. Yep. You got Jimmy Hoffa, you got like the Philly mob, which he never talked about. Never. You got, you know, you have Joe Pesci playing level-headed psychopath as opposed to an outrageous one, right? So like you have all of these different kind of conceptually interesting ideas that he's trying to express, but the execution isn't always the best, right? And so I think that it's the same with music and writing rhymes. It's like, you know, in theory, if I'm able to write a 24-bar verse all off the same rhyme scheme, it's impressive, but it's not a challenge. What's challenging is if I can write 24-bar verses off of that rhyme scheme and every bar still counts. Because I think I saw something, my man, shout out to Messiah Music. I was texting with him this morning, but he had said he saw something on Twitter that I saw too, which is that the true nature of top-notch lyricism, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not getting this perfect, is quotability, right? So,
okay,
you know,
I'm here for that.
I can't like, for example, right? I can't, somebody like a Wayne, especially now, right? Wayne is doing all of the technical stuff that people knocked him for not doing back in the drought Carter era.
Yep.
He's doing that now, and he's still doing the clever punchline stuff. So he can hop on that Bash Money joint with West Side Gun,
cook that,
and crush it
with the Griselda flow,
kill it. And he can also hop on you know,
with AZ.
Yeah, with AZ, and kill it. Yeah. and you're into it every bar. So I think that somebody like Wayne is a good example of that. I think you know, I think that Andre 3000 is a perfect example of that. Andre 3000 is somebody who can do everything really well, right? Where, you know, you might not say that Andre is the best in any particular category, but he's still great at everything.
100%. Yeah,
you know, so like he's not going to be the best punchline rapper, but he knows how to write bars that stick with you, right? He's not going to be flexing all of the flows that Kendrick has, but he's going to be able to have a really interesting delivery where he's saying cool stuff. And every now and then he's got that extra gear that some rappers just have it. Like Conway kind of had it on The Cow with West Side Gun, right? Where it's the entirety of the verse is greater than just the sum of its parts. You're there for the experience beginning to end. You may not even quote a single bar from it, but that's because you can't quote a single bar without quoting the whole thing. So I think that, you know, when it comes to content, delivery, technique, all of that stuff, you have to try to give equal weight to each of it as best you can. Because if you give too much weight to one of those areas, you're going to wind up kind of losing the point of what it is you're trying to do. And you're going to lose your listeners in the process as well.
For sure. So in this case, would you say that someone like 3 Stacks is like a jack of all trades? You say is a king of one particular trade? How would you look at someone like 3 Stacks in that situation?
So I think when it comes to somebody like Andre, it's like a 5-tool player in baseball. So somebody like Ken Griffey Jr. Hit for contact, hit for power. You can field, you can run the bases, you can, you know, bat runs in, you can field. So that's the kind of thing that I think I aim for as a rapper. I don't know that everybody else is going to aim for that same thing, but I know that that's one of the things that I really admire about Andre, you know.
100%.
So, yeah.
And as a fan, because like I said, I look at music as a fan, never a critic, never a spectator. I'm a fan of it. I'm a student of hip hop. I love everything that is hip hop. So when I look at hip hop, I'm also a big fan of what it kind of provides that a lot of music genres don't really provide. I mean, of course, some do, but storytelling. I think that's what Andre is a big master at, is storytelling. What do you think storytelling is something that most lyricists should have in their toolbox? Do you think it's something that's required to be a supreme lyricist in your mind?
I think I'm trying to think of a way of putting it. My favorite rapper of all time is Sean Price. And I cannot recall, I could be wrong, a single verse where he's like telling a fictional story from beginning to end, right?
No, I don't think so.
But he does have songs like Brokest Rapper You Know, where he's talking about his lifestyle and how it changed versus when he was a major label rapper. I think that he also has moments like on I Love You, I think on the Monkey Bars album, where he's talking about his wife and his relationship there. So I think that like storytelling as far as a linear point A to point B to point C story, I don't necessarily know that you need to be able to do that. I think Slick Rick and Ghostface are kind of the kings of that. I think that for me, the storytelling aspect of it that's the most interesting.
You mentioned Biggie and Nas. I'm kind of hurt by that.
Yeah, I mean, Big and Nas, I love as well. But even then, it's like I don't know that they have done that as often as Ghostface, like Slick Rick have. You listen to an album of theirs, there's like 5 storytelling joints on the whole album.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
Now, Nas and Big, I think where they are a little bit different is that they are able to tell stories in ways that we wouldn't have imagined them before, you know?
Never.
And even then, if you look at like I Got a Story to Tell, that was a true story.
Shout to Anthony
you know,
Mason.
It was personal narrative. It wasn't even like something that it wasn't even something that he was making up. It was a true story that apparently, unfortunately, happened to Anthony Mason. Yeah. Rest in peace to Anthony Mason.
Absolutely, rest in peace to Anthony Mason. And you mentioned Slick Rick having 5. I mean, Biggie did have, I think, at least 3 on each album, I feel like. And, you know, Nas to me, I don't want to say it's the greatest story of all time. It's tough to say it was the greatest story of all time. But I mean, Rewind is like,
one of the most creative.
That's different. That's different, man.
Yeah.
That's so different. And mentioning Nas, like, it's a great place to look at right now. As far as hip hop goes, you're seeing hip hop age like wine. You're seeing Nas with King's Disease 2 now after getting the Grammy last year for King's Disease 1. What do you look at as an artist, not as a fan of yourself, but as an artist of yourself? as far as longevity in hip hop, and I would continue to look like longevity hip hop can last forever. It can go on forever.
I think as art, the minute that we stop being able to find creative ways to do it is the moment where we should stop making it. You know, like how many artists did we grow up with who we always talked about how they were falling off because they kept making the same album over and over again, or the same singles. And in the major label system, you didn't really have as much freedom as you could have had to basically reinvent yourself every time out. You pretty much had to give the people what they wanted. If you didn't give the people what they wanted, your album wouldn't sell. Your album doesn't sell, you're not worth much to your label. If you're not worth much to your label, you're going to have to go the independent route. And back then, going the independent route was a lot more, it took a lot more work and a lot more money.
For sure.
And I think the freedom that a lot of people have now that they're able to enjoy, and the reason why hip hop is able to age more gracefully now than it did before, is because all of that stuff, like, it doesn't really matter anymore. You know, like we're the music industry as we know it kind of continues to, and I'm referring to the mainstream music industry, continues to kind of grow and evolve in the ways in which it can leech off of creatives, right? But I think we as artists have more resources than we've ever had to make what we want, how we want, and to release it how we want as well, and to just focus on the craft. So when I think about a group like Arm & Hammer, Billy Woods and Elucid, right?
Yes, sir.
10 years ago, if Arm & Hammer does an album with Alchemist, people are not going to be as receptive to it. But they were able to do that in 2021 because that's what the climate is. And Alchemist is, as a producer, not necessarily beholden to having to make the same hit records over and over and over again. You know what I mean? Like, Al can just make what he wants to make. He's made the hits. He's gone platinum over and over again.
You know who deserves a lot more credit than they deserve? I feel like in this whole realm of conversation we're having right now, especially mentioning Arm & Hammer and what they're doing Alchemist now, I say Run the Jewels not getting enough credit at all.
So, all right. So you want to talk about aging gracefully, right?
Yes, sir.
So I think LP and Killer Mike. I'm probably a bigger fan of their. I'm a bigger fan of their solo discographies than I am of their music together.
Likewise.
But I think that what they were able to do,
amazing.
If you told me in, like, when I was in high school, like, yo, one day Killer Mike and LP are going to form a group. They're going to be one of the most recognized groups in pop music. Recognizable logo, recognizable name. They're going to sell out shows all over the world. I would have looked at you like you were absolutely crazy.
Absolutely, man.
I would have, like, my brain wouldn't have been able to reconcile Killer Mike and LP in the same room.
And what speaks to it more, I feel like, to me as well, because, like, even like you're saying yourself, like, I'm much more of a fan of their solo work. So I love rap music. I love early Mike. I love Company Flow. I love early LP. They got together. The sound wasn't really for me, but what it told me was that it's for a lot of people. A lot of people love that sound, and that's it's insane to me that lane is there, and the fact that all these lanes are appearing now in hip hop, and underground hip hop is so big now that you can't call it underground anymore. Like, underground hip hop sells out festivals. Like, you can't call it underground anymore for real. So it's definitely a crazy thing to see, and goes back to your whole thing of subjectivity in hip hop, and everything is from the eye of the beholder. Really, it's not really necessarily in stone.
I mean, Arm & Hammer going first at Pitchfork on day one, and there being almost 1,000 people out there by the end of their set. Nobody. I mean, you know, I feel like we know enough about music festivals to know whoever's first on the lineup usually does not have that kind of an audience.
First.
But they drew that many people out at Pitchfork in the middle of a global pandemic. And, you know, I think that speaks to kind of where fans are moving as well. I think that's kind of the cool thing, right? Is people who are fans of the music, and as they get older, and if you want to talk about hip hop aging, it's not just the artists, but it's the fan base as well, are able to grow older and say, like, nah, you know what? This weirdo stuff, or this stuff that I might have gotten looked at as a weirdo for loving when I was younger, this is part of who I am now. This is the kind of music I love. So I'm going to put on for it because it's good music. And I don't have to worry about how people are going to feel about the fact that I champion it, you know?
100%. And like kind of going back a little bit to 1994, Nas drops Illmatic, changes hip hop, and artists start using multiple producers on their projects. Now you're an artist. You dropped the project this year with August Fanon. You had the deluxe drop Scenic this year as well. And you're seeing like we talk about Arm & Hammer with Alchemist. You're talking about Run the Jewels, Killer Mike, and LP, and all these artists are using one producer now. And it's artist, group, and a producer in the studio cooking. What do you think that dynamic does, and does that add to the quality of music?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're able to sit down and work on something with somebody for an extended period of time, then what you're going to make is going to wind up being great, because eventually you get used to the other person's style and the way that they do things. And then if you're able to take it a step further and say, okay, this is what we sound like as a unit, so let's keep sharpening this, I think that is something that comes out in the music as well. Like, I think this Def Prez album that we're about to put out is kind of emblematic of that. Because if you listen to the first two EPs with me, Knows the Time, and Crash Prez, I really like the music, and there's also a lot of room to grow in terms of the three of us writing songs together, as opposed to just like, you know, throw on a beat, I'll record my verse, you record your verse, and we're out.
And for the audience listeners not aware, can you please explain the dynamic of this group again?
Yeah, so Def Prez is Crash Prez and I are the rappers. Knows the Time is the DJ and the producer. We've put out 2 EPs together called Sunday. We are going to drop the remastered edition of those EPs as a single album on Friday, September 24th. So I'm sure by the time you guys are listening to this, it'll be available on my Bandcamp, defcee.bandcamp.com, along with physical copies of the CD. And, you know, the dynamic of the group grew out of, we got together and made our first EP in 3.5 hours, because I was up in Madison recording a bunch of stuff with Knows the Time over his beats. And then the 3 of us sat in a room together, and it was lightning in a bottle. And the first one, it was literally, we made 3 songs in like 3.5 hours. The next one from scratch, no lyrics, no beats. The next one took us a little bit longer, took us probably more like a weekend. And then this album we took even longer to make. But I think the time it took for us to kind of really incubate and make that record means that it's going to sound even better by the time people are able to listen to it. And, you know, my understanding of what art looks like as I get older, and again, like just kind of talking about aging as an artist, is that there's a certain appeal that a lot of pop music has that we as artists can still learn from and apply to what it is we do.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I can see, again, to kind of go back to Arm & Hammer at Pitchfork, Elucid singing the hook on Stone Fruit, and the whole crowd is up there with them. Or they're saying every word to like a Billy Woods verse because he's crafting it in a way where people are able to catch every word, and they're excited to say it when they see the show. So, and all of that kind of links back to, you know, pop music songwriting, maybe not necessarily in terms of like what they do and the stuff they came up listening to, but in terms of kind of what we all learned by osmosis as musicians. And instead of trying to, you know, really rebel against these ideas of song structure and all that, and just doing whole albums of like 32 bar verses, really trying to learn song structure so that we can write more interesting music that sounds like the stuff that we want to hear.
For sure. So in the world of the Arm & Hammers and you know, collaborating with the Alchemists, we have the Freddie Gibbs and Alchemists. We have all these artists dealing with Alchemists, Madlib, and Derringer, of course, with the Griselda crew. All these lyricists doing this amazing work now, how can the fan in the fans' ear, can those artists and these conglomerates coexist with the Lil Uzi Verts of the world, and how can the fans' ear, in your words, kind of differentiate between the two and also appreciate the two?
We don't have to place any emphasis on the commercial viability of the music anymore. So we don't have to worry about it might blow up, but it won't go pop. In the words of De La Soul, it's more so just kind of about, do I like this or do I not? That's it. It just kind of comes down to that now. And I think one of the things I love about being an artist is the ability to listen to everything, find value in it, and try to find ways that I can apply it to what it is I do.
For sure.
So like, for example, Uzi Vert, if you want to bring Uzi Vert up, that XO Tour Life song is great.
Great record.
That's a great song. And not because it's pop, not because it'll go off in the club, but because it's a great song.
Yeah, sure.
And I could say that about that. And I can also say that, Pivot Gang Hero is a great song too.
For sure.
It shares some of the same elements in terms of how melodic it is and all that, but they sound very different.
For sure. And I bring this up because, of course, I've told you this many times in the past. I've retired the idea of lists in hip hop and in music. Like, I used to be the top 50 rappers guy, top 25 albums guy. I still have a top 25 albums of my favorites, but like as far as the best go, you can't do it. It's impossible because of what you said as far as objectivity does not exist in art for real. So I say all that to say this, right? Rolling Stones magazine, one of the most illustrious magazines in music history, considerably, right? Just dropped the top 500 albums of all time. And when I tell you, bro, not albums, songs, top 500 songs of all time. And when I tell you how crazy this list is, like it makes no sense. I guess just grab 500 songs and say, here you go. Like it's really amazing. When I talk to you about the comparison to artists, it kind of makes me realize more and more. Like, you can't compare artists. You can't compare Uzi Vert to Arm & Hammer. You can't compare. You can't just enjoy them both of what they are. And for you as an artist and as a fan, like, how long did it take you to truly consume that idea?
I mean, I started consuming that idea when I first heard Freddie Gibbs. So the Miseducation of Freddie Gibbs mixtape, when I heard him rhyming and flipping those Midwest styles over the Big L flamboyant instrumental. When I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Okay. All right. This is something else. And so when I first heard the Midwest Gangsta Box Frame Cadillac Music tape, I was listening to what he was doing as an MC and appreciating it, while also kind of training my ear to appreciate the kinds of beats he was picking and rhyming on. And then I started listening to Pill. And then I started going back and checking Wayne out, So I started checking out some of the Atlanta stuff I was sleeping on. Started checking out more of Wayne's music, the stuff I was sleeping on, and the stuff that I was willfully ignorant of when I was a kid, because I was so into my underground hip hop stuff, and the Wayne fans used to annoy me. And I've told this story before. I remember that there was a kid who tried to put me onto Wayne, and he quoted me a Wayne bar that Wayne borrowed from Jadakiss. And he had no idea that it was a Jadakiss bar. It was the Gangsters Don't Die, They Get Chubby and Move to Miami. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, like, nah, what are you talking about?
Obviously.
Why would I?
It's a famous Kiss bar.
Yeah. Why would I rock with this music? You can't even quote me a line he came up with. And
I'm sure you came up rapping like in the block era, so I'm sure you had this experience a few times as well. I remember being like trying to be a rapper, and we were freestyle battle in the cafeteria, right?
Yeah.
I used to always love it when this happens, but people would constantly like just bite rappers, like just like slide bites. Remember one guy spit a verse. I'm so ahead of my time. My parents haven't met yet. I said, wait. I said, hold on. What? What are we doing? Like, talk about that element of hip hop as far as quote unquote biting, because that was a big thing at one point. I feel like that has kind of diluted a little bit now. But like, we talk about the importance of original lyrics.
I mean, for me, what's even more impressive than original lyrics are original styles, because there's nothing new under the sun. So there's somebody who's able to come through and rap in a way that is probably a more inventive way of something that I'm already used to. That's something that impresses me right off the bat. Now, if they're not saying anything, then I'm not going to be interested in it. But, you know, I think that a lot of that kind of stuff, like the biting or the emulation and all that, the place it shows up the most now, it doesn't really show up in the music as much as it used to. Except for like, you know, certain segments of the underground. I think there are certain guys who all kind of rap like each other. And I think it's the same in mainstream music too. Like, you just have people who are chasing that hit.
Yep.
But I think that the place where that happens most often is in battle rap. Like, I think that there are a lot of fake K-Shines, fake Twerks, fake Daylights, fake Chilla Joneses. Yep. And I think that the thing that I really miss about the initial era of battle rap as I got into it was that you had two people battling with different rap styles as opposed to, you know, different battle styles. So, you know, that kind of biting and all that, I mean, maybe in terms of like the business side of things, like if I know that you're biting somebody's cover art, the concept for somebody's song titles, the concept for somebody's album title, stuff like that annoys me a lot more than like,
yeah, that's corny.
That annoys me a lot more than, you know, like maybe you have two people who coincidentally kind of have the same idea at the same time.
Sure. And I mean, going back to battle rap and I guess hip hop as a whole, like you said earlier, it used to be very regionalized. Back when battle rap was battle rap, you can tell who was from New Jersey, you can tell who's from St. Louis, you can tell who was from, just by the stylistic, you can tell. And now all that's kind of just blended. Like everyone's trying to be Geechee Gotti, everyone's trying to be Sue Surf, like you said, and everyone's trying to be Lil Baby, everyone's trying to be like everyone's trying to be whatever is popular. And that is very annoying as a fan, for sure. I'm sure it's annoying as an artist as well.
Yeah. And also, every now and then you get a gem from that.
You do.
So you have somebody who's able to take, like, I fronted on Twerk for a while, for New Jersey Twerk, for people who are not familiar. I remember my students were like, he's the greatest ever. I was like, what? Because
like it was like
always used to yell. I was like, he just sounds like Disaster, you know, like just talked about guns instead of calling people names. And then as he kind of evolved and you started to kind of see what he was doing in terms of stepping up his craft, at that point, he became a monster who everybody was afraid of. And I think even somebody like Surf, you know, when he was doing what do I got to put it in subtitles or something, like where he kind of took what Conceited was doing,
definitely
flipped it in an interesting way, and then people were there for it. So, you know, I think my issue is just kind of with it's not with the cream of the crop, it's with everybody who thinks that if they can just paint the song by numbers, they're going to be able to get by. But you have to be able to put your own innovative twist or spin on what it is you're doing in order for people to really respond well to it.
Like everything ain't hot just because it's double time. Pretty much. Like, long story short. But like Also, like one thing that I always appreciated about mixtape era, going back to Wayne a little bit, was that era of rappers rapping over other beats, rapping over whatever, like the hot beat, just rapping and demolishing it, right? And recently, I'm not sure if you checked it out, but Cole rapped over Drake's "Pipe Down," and it's a whole different song now. Do you think anything like that will ever come back when artists can just recreate songs and do that again? You think it's dead now because the streaming era?
I think that the thing that'll come back is like the radio freestyle.
I think LA Leakers, yeah.
Yeah, so like LA Leakers, even the Flex stuff, like the early freestyles on Flex when he really started going crazy with it.
Yeah.
There's so much good material.
Black Thought killed that.
Black Thought killed it. Lux killed it. Griselda killed it. You okay? Royce killed it. Mickey Fax killed it. Even Un P, who was kind of like one of the early
Freestyle Fridays.
Yeah, he was dope. Albie Al had some crazy up there. Arsenal, like, you know, and T-Rex, Goods. Like do
you see yourself showing that skill off in the future?
Yeah, I mean, if they call me, absolutely.
For sure.
But I don't want to go anywhere I'm not invited. You know, so exactly. I would do it in a heartbeat. Are you kidding? That's what I've been waiting to do forever.
Nigga, yeah. I-95.
Yeah, man. And yeah, it's just that kind of stuff, I think, is the stuff that keeps me interested and the stuff that keeps me sharp. Because at the end of the day, like, I can write a good song, but that's not necessarily the challenge for me. The challenge is, how can I write a great song that also has great rapping? And not in a way that I think a lot of people do, where it's like, you know, the verses on this song are going to be super technical and the hook's going to be super catchy, but more so like, what are the pockets I can find in the beat? How can I work refrain into this verse? How can I find a way to, like, yeah, maybe make it technical, but it doesn't sound like that. The other artists will appreciate that, but they won't necessarily be able to feel like it's too much, like you're trying too hard. Like Graph is somebody who's like that. Wayne is somebody who's like that. You have these guys who are just very technical MCs, but it doesn't necessarily come across that way when you listen to them rhyme.
Right.
So, and when you listen to some of their songs too, like Wayne certainly being an example of this, you look at a song like A Milli, it's a smash hit, the rapping is excellent, you know?
Excellent, yeah. Excellent. So, and also like Spark, like everyone had to rap over that. You had to rap over that and do your best, because Wayne not only gave you guys a great beat to rap over, but also did his best on it. And that's like a phenomenal, a phenomenal era. Like record like A Milli and like of course J Electronic Exhibit C, those two records right there, I feel like define that kind of era of lyricism meets beat, and everyone try to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to think. I think A Milli was really the last time that you had a beat like that. Even some of these challenges on social media, if not had the kinds of
no way
impact that instrumental did, where all of us were rhyming on it.
Man, A Milli, Milli and Exhibit C were like the last two. I think it might have been the same year. Exhibit C and Milli were the last two that made me make everyone had to rap on these. It had to be done. And we look forward in hip hop. We look at what's going to happen in the future as far as what's coming up as hip hop, you know, continues to blossom, continues to change. Different eras are growing. We're also seeing a lot more, not only artists from the past making music, but we're seeing them get their flowers in different ways. We just saw the recent verses, Fat Joe versus Ja Rule, and I'm sure as a 90s kid like myself, that definitely had a, you know, put a few smiles on your face from time to time, just hearing some of those records and seeing the energy those two artists able to still provide.
Yeah, I mean, so like even those two guys, right? Like Fat Joe and Ja Rule, with time, you're able to look back at their careers and really say, somebody like Fat Joe's been out here since 91. He was writing graffiti all over New York in the 80s.
Facts.
And he's been making hit records since the early 90s.
Facts.
Up until all the way up is probably the most recent smash, but it's very difficult to think of another solo artist who is able to do that, to write songs like that often over the same period of time.
For sure.
And I think what's cool is that also those of us who came up. Hello?
Delusion?
Yo, you got me now?
I hear you now, yep.
Okay. So I think one of the other cool things that's happened with time is we're able to admit that we like Ja Rule's music.
Yeah.
Like enough time has passed to where we don't have to pretend. Like we can all say 50 won the battle, 50 won the war, and I also like the Ja Rule music I came up with. Like I still kind of like some of this stuff.
It's okay to admit it. Like we canceled Ja Rule, like we canceled the guy who cannot be named for Chicago. We canceled him the same kind of aggression. It's crazy. It's low-key crazy we did that to Ja Rule. And when you look at that verses, it's like you mentioned Fat Joe's run. Fat Joe's been out since 91. He had Big Pun, Terror Squad. Mid-2000s, he had a great reign with Lean Back and Make It Rain, came back all the way up. He had hits for legitimately 3 decades. But Ja Rule's little four-year window was monstrous, to say the least. Like,
yeah,
crazy.
I mean, even if you look at, right, like the premier RZA verses, right? RZA was holding his own with beats that really were mostly from like a 4-year time period.
For real.
From like 93 to 97. And Premier was playing things from like late 80s through, early to mid 2000s. It was hanging with them. Yeah, so man. I think that, one of the things that even this conversation, right? Like if you and I had this conversation 5 years ago, right? Yeah. I would probably be a little bit more animated and a little bit more like, firm in terms of my opinion. And I probably would have said something about like, I got to give Fat Joe the verses off general principle because,
See, for me, it's opposite. I've never been a Fat Joe fan. I've never, like Fat Joe, I give him respect for his catalog, but like I never felt like he was the reason his catalog was good. Like even with all respect to him, like Lean Back is a great record. Make It Rain is a great record.
So look. All right, so I got some homework for you to do.
Right,
I got some homework for you to do.
I've heard his albums. I heard the albums. I heard Johnny Blue. I've heard the albums. You know what I'm saying?
So you heard Don Cartagena.
Of course.
You heard that album.
Of course.
Okay. Have you heard The Dark Side?
Yeah, those are the 2 albums. Those are the 2 albums you got to hear for him.
Okay. All right, cool. Because I think Joe can really rhyme, and you also got to listen. You got to listen to that Digging in the Crates, the self-titled debut joint, because he was rhyming super crazy on there. And I think I'm the same way. I think for a long time I kind of fronted on Joe, and then around the time that All the Way Up came out, I got to the point where I was like, okay, like I kind of have to stop fronting. He's had a pretty incredible run for a long time.
Definitely respect him. Definitely gotta respect Fat Joe, and I think he definitely did a great job going against Ja Rule. Ja Rule's massive hits. But I just feel like Fat Joe's one of them artists where like it's kind of hard to place him. It's hard to tell what, because in of his era, I wouldn't say he's the top 5 artist of his era. It'd be hard to put him in the top 10 of his era. You know what I'm saying? It'd be tough. Like he's in the era with the big L's, and of course, I'm saying his counterpart Big Pun, and these artists who are like supreme lyricists, superstars, like next level like talents. And Fat Joe, I always classify Fat Joe in the same realm as I put Big Sean in now, I guess. That's what I kind of compare him to as far as this generation.
Okay. You said Big Sean and who?
I compare Fat Joe's career to Big Sean's of this era.
Oh, okay. All right. So here's the thing. I think Joe cares a lot more about how he's perceived as an MC than Big Sean does. Okay. I don't think I think it kind of shows up in the catalog. And I think Big Sean, at a certain point, his rhymes and the way that he rhymes was working well enough for him that he would, you just go in the booth and it's like, okay, let's knock that out, on to the next one. Knock that out, on to the next one, right? But I think Joe, the interesting thing about him and his style is he's kind of been able to adjust to every era. And the thing that I really, really respect about Jay-Z is that Jay-Z as a rapper does not rest on his laurels. Never. He's somebody who, every generation you hear he's able to kind of adapt what's dope, but flip it in his own style so that it sounds authentic and sincere.
Now, mention the Versus and Jay-Z. So I have 4 rappers who I believe if Versus is mentioned with these 4 rappers, they should be left alone. No one should bother these 4 rappers. I want your opinion on these 4. So it's Jay-Z, Wayne, Kanye, and Drake.
Okay.
I don't think they should be touched. They should don't even call their names to the field unless they're going against one of each other. Like, leave them alone.
I mean, Wayne and Drake they did a whole tour around that.
Yeah, that's fair. But that was also 10 years ago. and I don't think Wayne.
Damn, it's been that long.
Facts.
That's crazy.
That was before Wayne went to jail.
Wow. Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, man, we old, bro.
That's super crazy.
We old,
I think those 4 are dope. I think you could probably throw Dre in there. I think you could throw Dr. Dre in there. I think there are certain people.
You know what's problem with Dre? I know Puff is talking that shit, but he already want that Dre smoke.
Puff can't. Yo, look.
He don't want that Dre smoke.
Puff. All due respect to Puff.
And I love
Biggie. as a talent scout and a label guy, Puff is one of the greatest ever. But why are you doing the verses? Let the hitmen do the verses. Let Nasheem Merrick, Yogi, Easy LP, Easy Mo B, let all of the hitmen come back. D-Dot, and let them do the verses, man. Don't try to come out here like, and again, no disrespect at all, but like, don't try to come out here like you touched a drum machine in the 90s. You didn't do any of that. You told them what to do. You picked the beats.
Executive producer.
You A&R'd the project. And that's what you did. You don't like.
Yes, I think I heard someone say he should battle L.A. Reid. I'm like, that makes kind of sense. I mean, L.A. Reid it wouldn't be fair for L.A. Reid, of course. But I feel like the thing makes Puff so interesting. What makes Puff so much like it's hard to say he can't do it is because he has his own music. That's the only part that makes him like, okay, I guess. But you can't go up there and play 10 Biggie records for real because you wouldn't produce those 10 Biggie records. Like, you can play the ones he's talking on, I guess. Like, he can play those, but you can't just play the whole Biggie playlist against JD. That's unfair.
Yeah.
That's unfair.
Nah, it's really not. But I mean, even somebody like, do you think Puff would beat Organized Noise? No. Do I think that Puff would beat Dallas Austin? No. If we're just talking about Puffy songs, nah.
Just Puffy songs?
Just Puffy songs.
I don't know, man, because Puffy, like, that first album got some joints on it. Victory is on that album.
Oh, I love it. I love Victory. I love Young G's. I love Is This the End? I love
all about the Benjamins.
Yep. Oh yeah, Benjamin's is crazy. Benjamin's is like
some records he can play. Like,
Benjamin's is the versus cheat code.
Yeah.
Like if you play Benjamin's in any context, like if I ever do a versus, it's gonna be 19 of my songs and all about the Benjamins. I don't even care that I didn't make it. It's gonna win. That's all that matters.
The song I'm tired of hearing on versus now is Banned from TV. I've heard Banned from TV 3 times on versus.
So
it's been played for everybody.
First of all, Cameron is on Banned from TV.
And didn't get to play it.
And his verse on there is hot.
Super hot.
And I love Banned from TV, but
best verse on there is Nature though.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yes, sir.
Of course. But at the same time, it's like at a certain point,
how many times play it? I heard Jadakiss play it. I heard
how many times can you listen to the same 5-minute posse cut?
Facts in the same loop, the same beat loop.
Yeah.
But another great. I feel like what Puff has is that he has that artistry, right? So he has like he didn't produce More Money More Problems, but he's on the song. So More Money More Problems getting played, and that's like it's a tough one. It's a tough record to stand against. It's in the Mace records, you know, Mary J. Blige joint. It's gonna be tough to stand against some of the records.
I know, but I also think that one of the things, and I also feel like all of these dudes are probably well paid enough
for sure
to maybe not particularly care about this anymore, but I think we really have not done a good job of showing the hitmen the love that they deserve for the output that they've had.
For sure.
And I remember I was on Wikipedia and I was looking, this is when, rest in peace, Chucky Thompson.
Man.
But Chucky Thompson,
you look at his, he did everything.
If you look at his discography, it's incredibly impressive. And then I went and I looked at, yo, and in My Life from Mary J. Blige.
Yes. He produced One Mic by Nas.
Yeah, come on now. So somebody like Chucky Thompson or like, you know, Nasheem Merrick and Easy LP. You know, Easy LP did the Special Delivery beat. He did the Get Money beat. Nasheem Merrick did huge records. I know, man. And it's Easy LP, and nobody talks about Easy LP the way that they should either, in my humble opinion.
Like if Puff is allowed to play all those records, I don't know why JD is bothering him. Like I love Jermaine Dupri too. Like don't get me wrong, I love Confessions like the next man. But you can't play Bow Wow against this shit.
You really
play Crisscross against this shit.
You really can't. And I feel like I don't know enough about. I would have to check the Wikipedia page on Jermaine Dupri.
You know enough. You know enough. I'm telling you, like I look myself like and some of it is like reputable records. Like, yo, this is Puff we talking about. Like, if Puff can play just the shit he ain't really touch for real, like what you gonna like? What I Need a Girl comes on. What you gonna play? What do you play against Harlem World? What do you play?
Yeah.
I'm saying 24 Hours to Live comes on for the 4th time on Versus. What you gonna play now? That's another record that's been played too many times on Versus. 24 Hours to Live. There's another one on Versus records been played too many times.
And also
Jadakiss did it.
Yeah, but also like
Swizz did it.
You kind of have to. There are certain joints, if you don't play it as a fan, I'm gonna be disappointed. So I still want to see the Nori Beanie Siegel one happen.
Hey, I think that'd be fire. I've told you off the mic how I feel about this one. I'm trying to keep it respectable with my man's Nori. I love Nori, bro. Yep. I love Nori, man.
Yep.
No way in hell is he gonna touch Beanie Siegel.
You're also gonna get they're definitely gonna play Banned from TV.
Definitely play Banned from
in
TV.
That versus as well. That's definitely gonna go off.
And Nori has some major records, but when What We Do comes on.
But here's the thing. I know people who
feel it in the air.
I know people who are from New York who swear that the War Report is better than the Infamous. Right?
They must be from Queens only.
Swear up and down that it's better. But I think that also, if we want to go back to the fan versus artist conversation, right? We as artists are going to see things a lot differently than we would as fans. And I think if you take a look at what Nori was doing, like on the War Report, it was all supposed to be about Capone, and Nori was supposed to be the hype man. Nori was really supposed to be like Freaky Ty for real. Rest in peace to Freaky Ty. But like he was supposed to be the hype man of the group. And then when Capone went away, Nori,
like West Side of Conway.
Yeah. Yep. And then Nori had to come out and basically do the whole album with
Nori's debut is classic. Nori's debut is classic record.
But Nori's rapping on the War Report, what's so impressive is there's no like, that's all him studying with Traj and going in the booth and rhyming. Like there's no real song structure, nothing super crazy. It was just him in the studio rhyming. And I think that there's something to be said about rappers who have the ability to tap into just that natural charisma and conversational style that still comes across as something that's very endearing and unique, as opposed to somebody who, as I was saying before, just going back to those 24 bar multi-syllabic rhyme schemes. You know, like you got to keep. Go ahead.
You good?
My fault.
You good?
But yeah, I think that for me is like something that I've had to learn as an artist as I've gotten older, because I've been in the room, right, where it's an open mic and I have the crazy, 48 bar, if I get invited on Funk Flex, this is what I'm kicking on there.
Right.
And then the guy who gets up there or the woman who gets up there and just off of their charisma has the room in a frenzy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that what I was doing was more valuable than what they were doing, or that it was like less appreciated than it should be. It means that in that space, in that time, for that purpose, that was what people were feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we as artists, when we're going through that fandom period, spend so much time trying to parse out like who the greatest crafts person is, that we lose sight of the fact that there are some people who just know how to make really good music, and that's also a skill that's worth celebrating. And that those people who know how to make really good, like interesting and engaging music, Gucci Mane being one of them, can always get into that pocket of, I'm going to rap really well and have bars that you're going to quote by the end of my verse. So
100%. I mean, DMX is a great example as well. And I guess real quick to try to defend Puff as a super Biggie fan here. Compared to me, what Puff has provided, like, as far as not being, like you said, touching the drum pad, like, not really being an instrumentalist as far as making the music. Compare that to, say, a DJ Khaled.
That's a good point. I mean, Khaled did start off as a hands-on DJ and producer.
Okay.
Like he was making beats for Fat Joe.
Facts.
Way back. So that is kind of the one thing that I would notice as a distinction between the two of them. Okay. And Puff seems kind of more like he was, because I think he was a dancer, right? Wasn't he a backup dancer too?
He was a dancer back in the 80s. Yep, back in the 80s.
Yeah. Yes. So I think it was like, it's a combination of, being. No, you're good. I think it was a combination of a backup dancer, like somebody who had a mind for being a record executive, who had also the charisma to be an entertainer. So, and knew, just had, good taste and good sensibilities when it came to putting records together. So I think I think that's kind of the difference. I think what Khaled does in terms of making himself known on his records, I think that was something that really helped him initially and really endeared people to him. But I think we saw the same thing happen with Puff. At a certain point, you have to be willing to take a step back, let the music take center stage, and really just be there for, the accent and the flavor.
For sure. But Puff had one little element that Khaled didn't have, I feel like, though. And that's that he became an artist somehow. I don't know how he did it. He turned himself into an artist.
Yeah, as hard as he tried. And I mean, Khaled's an artist too, but he's just not
I'm not sure if you heard the Angel remix, but Puff be singing, man. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Wait, the what remix?
Angels, like it's off his what's it called?
Last Train to Paris.
Yeah,
that joint is dope. That joint is crazy. Although all of that is
production.
What's her name? For what? Nah, not well. I mean, it's the.
You mean the Danny Kane? What's her name? Danny Kane, the girl that sang.
No, the songs were by old girl from Danny Kane.
Yeah, Danny Kane.
Dawn Richard, right?
Yeah, Dawn Richard. Yep.
Yeah, Dawn wrote all those songs. So yeah, I mean, part of it is also like, again, Puff having those sensibilities. And
would you call him a talent scout?
I think that's doing him a disservice, to be honest, because anybody can scout talent, but not everybody can put a record together. But fair. something that Puff is really,
he's the first curator.
Yeah, for real. And I think something that's really interesting about what he does is that he also has an ear for really good rapping. So somebody like Your Old Droog has written multiple songs for Puff. Somebody like back when Royce and Pharoah Monch were like rappers.
Yes, sir.
And hadn't really become the legacy artists that they've become since then. He had them writing records for him. So I think, and I am not Puff's biggest fan in a variety of ways in terms of they're just like, I think there are certain artists who should have never, whose lives should not have turned out the way that they did. And I'm sure that their own decision making kind of led to that. And, again, with the benefit of time and hindsight, I'm sure that the people around them would agree. And at the same time, if your brand and your image is benefited by the music of those people around you, if you're not willing to pay homage, or just find ways to put them in positions to win, I don't know. That just it doesn't really feel right.
Right. I feel
and also, like, I think a lot of hearing what Styles and the Lox talked about, because they were so vocal about getting off of Bad Boy.
That boy Styles went to throw a refrigerator on top of Puff. he tried to throw a fridge on him. Hot 97.
The double door joints, stainless steel. No security in the world can protect you from an elevator or a refrigerator. The double door joints. I think those guys really saying like, nah, we got the standard issue music industry contract. And the difference was that we saw what Puff and Big were doing, and we thought there's no way that Puff is going to treat us like just anybody else.
Right.
Like Puff is going to look out for us, and that's how you learn the music business. So unfortunately, in that era, you have the option now, and it's a very nice option to totally avoid it if you want to as an artist. And I think that's kind of, not to be flippant about it, because I know that people have like familial obligations, and losing a huge chunk of money is definitely something that puts your life and your livelihood at risk. But I think the whole thing with like Karen Civil, that's the conversation that's happening around that.
Yeah, man.
Makes me grateful that I'm in an era where I can be heard and I can have my music heard without necessarily having to, operate as if I need to
depend on leeches.
Because I don't know enough about that situation to really call her that, and I don't want to call her that.
For sure.
But I don't want to you never want to be in a position where you have to choose between, I've got a kid on the way and very few resources left to my name. So I'm going to take this one last shot at making it in music. And
you're robbed, potentially.
Yeah. I would rather work a 9 to 5.
And we mentioned Puff. We mentioned like Puff's business and also Puff's like, well, questioning what he provides to the music in a sense, right? And there's an artist I want to bring up real quick before I get you out of here. From our city, someone I hold to a high regard. My favorite artist probably ever outside of like Prince or Biggie, right? And that's Kanye West, right? Kanye West has made amazing albums. Me, I give him 6 classics. I always say I give him 6 classics. As a tough pill to swallow for some people, but I say he has 6 classic albums. Never really regarded as a lyricist because, of course, his pen has been helped in ways before, and he also has had the same kind of issues as Puff as far as giving the respect to those who've helped him in the past. Where do you hold Kanye as far as like as an artist? Like I know outside of production, like artistry wise, when you listen to hip hop, does Kanye provide in his history what you want? Like, do you consider Kanye a lyricist? Do you consider Kanye? Do you put Kanye in the box you put these other rappers in at all?
So I wanna push back a little bit on him never having been considered a lyricist, because I feel like the Freshman Adjustment mixtape through,
I mean, that's for us. For us, yeah.
Late Registration.
Yeah.
Nah, but people were talking about him in those conversations about lyricism.
But once we found out that Ryan Fest wrote Jesus Walks, I feel like that's when the wheels came off a little bit.
I mean, for me, I think him having ghostwriters is probably like, I'm sure it's something I'm positive it's something that's happened in the past, but I think in terms of his creative process and kind of like reading the behind the scenes stories about how a lot of his albums have been made, I think that what's probably closer to the truth is that he kind of does this writing by committee thing where he has people in the studio he runs his verses past.
Like even that record that just got leaked by Drake, the amazing verse with Andre 3000. If you hear what Kanye is rapping on his verse when he's dissing Drake, he also says that he pretty much got rid of Sahai the person. Sahai said Sicko Mode was the biggest record he ever wrote on. So like shit like that makes me think of like the Puff-esque vibes that he provides at times, you know.
Yeah.
Sahai to me is one of them artists that Sahai should be much larger than he is as an artist beyond just a writer.
And also, if you want to talk about somebody's ego getting in the way of the music, Sahai's verse on Father Stretch My Hands is amazing. That's an amazing verse. And it's really like a disservice to Kanye that he left it on the cutting room floor for whatever reason. Because that song would have been amazing with that verse. I would rather listen to that verse 10 times in a row than the actual joint that came out and the verse that Kanye has on it. Now, I think that there are moments where Kanye has like done interesting things rap wise, like on that part with Schoolboy Q, where
it's a body.
The delivering is really cool. The stuff he's saying is kind of like but the delivery is really good. And I think he was trying something that worked for him in that space that might not have worked for him in a lot of other spaces. But I think when I go back and I revisit a lot of Kanye's stuff, you know, his rapping is not the greatest. And I don't know that his rapping ever really was the greatest.
The scary part about it is like when he does rap well, like I'm a big fan of Twisted Fantasy. You can never tell when it's him or when it's Pusha. You can never tell when it's him or when it's Sahai. Like there's moments you think you can tell, but you never really know. You could never really know because it's Kanye. But like I in my heart, I like to believe that Chi-Town version of Nas, I'm saying his pen and not Pusha's pen. But Chi-Town nigga with Nas flow, I mean.
But I mean, Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is cool that you bring that up because that's probably his best writing.
Right? For me, it's either that or Late Registration. Those are two.
Yeah, I was just about to say Late Registration. Because I think, he had something to prove and he wanted to assert himself,
man.
and he was in a really healthy space.
Roses
but
is gone. Yeah, man. It's great.
Crack music, you know, like he was tapped into something. But even then, I think if you go back and you listen to the people who were, you know, if you want to really get into what people typically perceive as lyricism, I think if you want to go back, you know, he was coexisting in eras with people like Jadakiss and people like LP and people like, you know, people like Killer Mike and
Most Def. Yeah,
Most Def and Andre 3000, people who are really kind of, if they weren't at the height of their powers, were near them.
At the same time, he was going against like the Jeezus and the Lil Waynes and this like the Southern uprising. He was going against that at the same time.
Yeah, and I don't know if you kind of stack up who was popping in the mainstream and who was getting that shine as far as being lyricists in the underground at that time. I don't even know that he's like top 25, just because I think there are a lot of different names to go through if you want to really revisit it. You know,
the era of time is crazy.
Right. But I think the thing that he was able to do was he was able to articulate a specific experience in a way that was palatable to mainstream consumers, while also kind of retaining enough of that, you know, element of lyricism as we perceived it growing up, in order to keep us engaged as well. So I think that his greatest strength as an artist has always been his ability to, well, not always, because he's definitely, I feel like ever since Yeezus, he's a man without a country. But I think that from probably freshman adjustment through Yeezus, he's been somebody who's been very good at like reading the room and trying to figure out.
Is Yeezus before or after Pablo? I'm sorry, cut you off.
It's before. It's 2013. Okay. Yeezus is 2013. Pablo is 2016. Yeah, and
there's some moments on Pablo. There's definitely some moments on Pablo.
I agree, but they're kind of like, it's not a cohesive idea in the same way that Yeezus and the joints that came before it are. It seems more kind of like a playlist. Like, these are a playlist of my favorite joints.
Perfect. You said it perfectly right there. And I feel like that's something that I feel like Drake has introduced to hip hop that I kind of just do not like. I do not like these projects that are like playlists. I want an album. Like I'm cool with playlists. It's great. I'm saying, but I want an album. Like albums, a 15 track album, cohesive. You know, that everything kind of sounds merry. I love that. I'm saying that's what music. I feel like that's like an album is supposed to be. So I really hate this trend of like that started with if you're reading this is too late. Ever since that album, I feel like the floodgates have opened up.
All right. First of all,
great album by the way.
All right, look. If you're reading this is too late, does not feel like a playlist. I feel like the first joint I heard from, like, even More Life, which he described as a playlist.
We think his views starts it off.
Yeah, felt a lot more like a cohesive project, right?
Yeah, much more that UK grudge.
Yeah. And then Scorpion was the first time I heard it. And then you saw the Spotify ads and playlists where I was like, oh, this is specifically to capitalize on streaming revenue. And there are only a handful of artists who have the kind of reach to be able to do that. And none of them are doing what I'm doing. And again, if we want to go back to the beginning of this conversation and our conversations, which have been about how relevant or irrelevant, you know, the categorizations of the music have become, or the structures that in the past have kind of prevented independent artists from being successful and have only really propelled music that's fit a certain criteria for mainstream pop music consumption. I think that you don't have to buy into that. I would much rather just be, you know, direct to consumer for the first 2 weeks, or, you know, Bandcamp only for the first 2 weeks before hitting streaming platforms, because that's something that is going to be more effective for what it is I do from a business standpoint. Now, if at a certain point in the future, the opportunity arises for me to work with artists on something that could be really dope and could be me bringing my world into the worlds of those other two artists. And I think that, you know, it would be something that would be well received and highly streamed and all that. I think I would feel a little bit differently about it. But for right now, I think as far as albums are concerned, if I'm making an album or a project, I want to put that joint out on Bandcamp so that people can enjoy it for what it is, as opposed to, you know, just dropping a playlist worth of songs and hoping one of them lands on Rap Caviar or something like that, you know?
Absolutely. And I feel like that's also goes like, I feel like Drake just makes these albums that are just long. I feel like we make an album that's over 20 songs, it's hard to make it cohesive and make it sound merry. Like Donda, I feel like does sound cohesive, like sonically, like the sound of it, even the subject is it's all one place for the most part, but it just isn't a rap album. Like CLB on the other hand, like that album it's all over the place. It's just a bunch of Drake hits. It's just a bunch of Drake hits.
It's Drake. It's Drake saying, "I got my 5 radio joints. I got my 5. I got my 5. 12. I got my 5 like my rapidy rap joints. I got my 5. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of feels like, and maybe even, you know what, man? It might have even been since Views. Like I think
definitely that's what I'm saying. Like, Views is definitely like Views had Controller. Views had like a bunch of just random ass songs on it that just did not go together. Like all over the place.
Yeah. And then that was the formula that he tightened up on Scorpion.
Definitely.
So anyway, like to not talk too much about Drake, because you know we already kind of get the same haircut and we also get the same haircut at the barbershop, or used to. I'm not gonna have a heart ever on my forehead,
especially with the hairline start going back. Like what you doing, Drake? The hairline going back a little bit now, bro. You gotta chill.
Tell me about it, man. I can't. You know, my hair is thinning. I'm getting older.
You still wearing the hat.
You know what I mean?
I mean, you and Drake have a lot of similarities. You say it like that, bro. It's like a lot of similarities. You and Drake, you say it like that. But no, man. Hey, go ahead.
You know, I think in general, the really cool thing about music now is there's something for everybody. And as long as you're good at what it is you do, and to bring it back, I know I've been bringing these names up throughout the interview, but something Billy Woods told me back in 2015 really kind of shifted how I viewed things, which is that everybody has talent in hip hop is given like a different blade. So some of us have this huge broadsword on some Excalibur, and then some of us have a pocket knife. And it's not necessarily about the blade you have, it's about how sharp you keep it. And when he said that, it kind of opened my mind up to a lot of different stuff, because now I'm going to be able to appreciate the art for what it is in terms of it being well made, as opposed to dwelling too much on, you know, whether or not the rhyme schemes are on point, whether the similes and the metaphors are original, whether or not the pocket is, you know, technically precise. Just enjoy the music for what it is, appreciate how diverse the styles are, and also appreciate that all of us as musicians are listening to each other, learning from each other, and continuing to set and reset that bar for one another. Because all that means is that as the years go by, hip hop music is going to continue to get better and better. And you and the fans are going to have more options and variety to choose from as fans. And I think when we're able to lean into that idea and lean away from the idea that like the best music never goes platinum, or the best rappers don't know how to make good songs, or anything of that nature, I think at that point, we're all going to be a lot happier with the way music is. And we're going to be able to kind of like just really just concentrate on the craft of making music, not
100%.
the craft of writing the greatest bars or the greatest punchlines, but just the craft of making music that you enjoy, that's unique to you and your life story, and that's sincere.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
And long story short, I'm saying the dull blade ain't gonna cut it. Man, I'm saying like it's
No,
the dull blade won't cut it.
you gotta stay sharp, and especially the other thing that I'll say too is that something that I've learned from operating and moving in spaces like Rec Shop is that I can't rest on my laurels either.
Real talk.
Because I may not necessarily be as well known as a lot of rappers, but these kids in this generation behind us, they're studying the same exact things we were studying, and they're studying the stuff that's hot now.
Yep.
And they are, it's like when Wolverine met Weapon X in Logan. It's like, yo, it's crazy. You know, I can't, this man has the same powers as I do, but they're all even better. Yep. So yeah, man, I think I appreciate this conversation in particular. I appreciate having these conversations with you, because I think that I never want to get so precious about this indie stuff that I fall back into the same traps I did as a teenager, because then I'm just going to be listening to the same 5 rappers and doing the same 5 things well all the time. So I appreciate being able to engage in conversations with you, because I think you're able to like assess everything, give it equal weight, and not try to concern yourself with categorizing things as much as you are just trying to concern yourself with finding the illest possible music that you can, because it speaks to you.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to continue to talk. Because I always say, like, as a student hip hop, a fan of hip hop, I've always been the guy who listens to, like you said, the underground stuff. But as time goes on, you want to, like, at least I want to, like, hear why is this ill to you? Like, it's a question I always want to ask, like, why is this good? Like, you know Joseph Chilliams, great friend of mine, great friend of yours. Like, that boy's ear is one of the most amazing things in the world to me. Like,
for real,
the things he listens to, I'm like, how do you listen to this and this? Tell me how, like, or what to learn.
And if you want to talk about somebody who's able to study everything. Shout out to Joe, because he is one of the few rappers who I've met and know personally who's able to appeal to everybody at once, because he knows he's absorbed so much great music from so many different places that accomplishes different things. And the way that he executes that music and that vision is unique to him. It's technically sound, it's creative, it's clever, and it has a lot of appeal to a lot of different people because he's tapped into something different. For sure. And, I think I agree with you, man. Joe's got one of the illest ears of anybody I've met, because I've sat in that basement with him, and as he's gone through samples and loops and all that.
Oh, so, man, his sample searches, like, he listens to Bjork and like Amy Winehouse to find Sam, Fiona Apple. I'm like, yo, where do you find these people?
He listens to stuff. He's like, he'll sample stuff where I don't even know what the language is of, like, I don't know what this artist's name is because I can't read the language. It's not in standard like American, British, English letters. It's like Finnish or Icelandic or something like that. You know what I mean? So
100%, man.
Yeah.
But hey, appreciate you as always, Defcee, man. Please make sure y'all check out new project. I'm saying the Def Press coming out soon. Please say where they can find it, where they can find you, bro. The project should be out by the time this drops. Project dropping on 9/24, like you said.
Yep. So it's the remastered edition of the first 2 Def Press EPs as a single album called Sunday Sessions. That'll be on defcee.bandcamp.com. I've dropped an EP and an album this year, the Scenic Deluxe Edition with Nick Arcade. Shouts to him. We Dress the City with Our Names with August Fanon. Shouts out to him.
Absolutely.
And the last two things that we're going to have this year, the Def Prez album, which is crazy. It has a lot of really interesting surprises on it. And my debut for Backwoods Studios, produced entirely by Messiah Music. So, yep.
That boy working,
whole lot,
man.
Whole lot going on, man. Whole lot going on. I'm done recording for a minute.
Hey,
because,
well deserved, bro. It's like the stage now. Time for the stage, Duff. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Nah, man. I gotta look. I got some pretty incredible family stuff in the near future that's gonna keep me from being able to really commit that much time to it.
Hey, man, beautiful, man.
Which is very beautiful, and also, is going to give me time to really figure out how to come back out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Yesterday's price is not today's price. But yeah, thanks for everything, Juice. Thank you for always showing love. Thank you for just being a genuinely good human being. I appreciate you.
Likewise, brothers. Always stay good in the hood. Love.
Yes, sir. Love. Peace.